Checkpoints is presented by pharmaceutical company GM Pharma.
Mr. Welton, thank you for being with us and taking our questions.
Thank you for having me.
What is AmCham's initiative about setting up a business working group that will be dealing with some issues that are connected with the middle corridor? In which ways could the private sector contribute to this process?
Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me. Most appreciate it to talk about this very important issue. Before we get onto the middle corridor, though, I do really want to congratulate the Georgian people, the team, everybody involved for the fantastic result last night. I am sure there are very few people watching the show today whose principal concern is the middle corridor. Hopefully that will be our concern moving forward, but right now everyone is appropriately obsessed with the great result. So congrats on that.
So you have been cheering hard.
Yes, absolutely. I think everyone in the country
Exactly.
was cheering along on that one. So in answer to your question, just to start by being clear, I mean, the American Chamber of Commerce brought this issue forward as part of the Investor Council, and obviously the Investor Council represents this wide range of business associations, the international financial institutions, the World Bank, EBRD, IFC and others, and of course all the partners amongst the Georgian government. And it's a great platform for bringing people together precisely because it brings a great deal of expertise and knowledge on the ground that particularly is coming from the private sector, combined with the technical knowledge and expertise that both the government and the IFIs bring. The reason we thought it was important to bring this up, and we of course prepared this in advance with all the other business associations and all the other partners, the reason why we thought this was important to bring up is that if you're looking at Georgia right now and thinking about economic growth over the next 10, 20, whatever number of years, there really are two things on the horizon which are the principal focus of your attention. One, of course, is EU membership, and again, congratulations on gaining the candidate status. That is phenomenal and possibly the most transformative thing that has happened in the 20 years I've been in Georgia. The second thing, of course, is the middle corridor. Now, for an awfully long time, the Silk Road was talked about as this potentially transformative thing that Georgia was part of, but often that was very hopeful, that was very aspirational. I think the EU potential membership, and then, of course, Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the reorganization of the region that this has created has really made the middle corridor a very pressing and major part of any plans that anyone would have for the growth of the country. So when we look at what's going on, there's obviously a huge amount of work going on in this space already. I mean, we're basically seeing huge amounts of investment in every component of the infrastructure that is related to this. Obviously, we're seeing this going on in the ports, in the roads, in the railway, in the airports. Each one of these subjects are things that could be talked about at great length. Added to which there have been international agreements come to bringing together the countries along the Silk Road. A couple of years ago, we had the agreement between Georgia, Turkey, Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan about basically coordinating economic activity, particularly on transport and logistics. We've seen a lot of private investment going on into the sector. But after the infrastructure and the international coordination, the work on the areas of internal coordination, and particularly what happens at the borders, so customs activities and how one transitions goods into and out of the country, become a critical part of the story.
What type of clarity could the involvement of a business community bring to the table? Because you also mentioned all sorts of things. We've already seen World Bank's official research that says basically the same, that there are a lot of challenges on the way, together with the opportunities, and this needs needs prioritization. How could business help in defining these priorities?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I think the principal role that the businesses bring to the table is a practical understanding of how policy is being implemented on the ground and the way this is being experienced by the businesses. Of particular note from that World Bank report that you've cited extensively already is the fact that between 2021 and 2022, you saw a very significant increase in the container cargo that was going along the Silk Road. But then between 2022 and 2023, you saw most of those gains being reversed. Now, a lot of that comes down to the simple fact that this route continues to be quite an expensive route, and that a lot of those expenses are to do with not having enough physical infrastructure or not good enough physical infrastructure, and that is being fixed by the government. But also a lot of it ends up being about administration and how things happen at borders. And businesses can be very good at sort of explaining to the government and having discussions with the government about how things need to be practically implemented. I'll give you an example. We as AmCham, when the war started, had a number of big consumer companies approaching us. That is, companies that were selling consumer goods like, soft drinks and bars of chocolate and bleach and things like that, most of which gets imported into the country. Now, historically, that got imported from Russia because that was the sort of production hub. In the aftermath of the war with Ukraine, all of these companies wanted to be bringing their products from places other than Russia, particularly bringing it from the EU. But the products were labeled in a way that didn't fit with Georgian law because they were coming out of factories that didn't produce packaging of the right kind. So we were able to get the Georgian government to sort of suspend the law on packaging for a period of time to allow the shift from the Russian production to the European production, so that now almost all of the products that are coming into the country of that kind are no longer being sourced out of Russia. Now, that's a practical administrative issue that may simply not have occurred to a government person and a business can advise on it.
More about that.
Yeah. So I mean, that's one sort of area. There are other areas where customer practices look great on paper, or where a piece of new technology is brought into place, but it ends up not really working very well with businesses' sort of workflows. And so it needs to be tweaked in various ways. And so we've been working through the Investor Council with a range of different elements of this transportation corridor and transport logistics issues. The EBRD through the Investor Council is working with the government on some broad strategic planning, like the new transport logistics strategy that will be coming out in the next year. They're also working on helping to develop a system to allow trucks to be taken onto rail, so that we actually can take some of the trucks off the road and facilitate, because obviously as much as possible we want the middle corridor to be a rail corridor rather than a road corridor, because we don't want our roads to get horribly congested or our cities to get terribly polluted. So they've been working in those kind of areas, but then there are these other areas where administration and the experience of businesses on the ground can be incredibly useful for helping to sort of fine-tune the details of how these things are implemented.
So what type of businesses should be involved in this working group? I mean, are you looking like specifically to those that have to deal with the middle corridor, or do you think like expertise of the business community is broader enough to be contributing to this process?
Sure. Well, I mean, thanks for giving me the opportunity to say nice things about my organization. I mean, business associations like AmCham, which is the largest international business association in Georgia, I mean, really bring together a very significant proportion of the Georgian economy as a whole. And we operate specifically to try and bring together a range of different views and a range of different elements of expertise. And it might not just be one thing. I mean, you often need lawyers and accountants and transport and logistics experts, but then also maybe production experts in particular areas. So we would aim to bring in and bring the expertise where necessary to deal with the particular questions, and we will engage with our members to do that. And so the current format of the Investor Council, which is mostly working through these big business associations, is a good way of bringing expertise from an incredibly wide range of sectors. Now, of course, transport and logistics companies are going to be a significant part of that, but then there are almost no businesses that don't involve some significant element of import into the country of what they are doing. I mean, consumer goods companies, of course, but tourism companies, construction companies. I mean, everybody is bringing things in to do part of their business, and so they all have different kinds of expertise in how this works.
Mm-hmm. My last question at this point: will this group be more flexible, mobile, more focused on middle corridor issues? Because Investors Council is a great platform, but it has a lot of issues going in and out. How do you see this process? Will that group be more transparent with media, giving comments and bringing that working situation to the light, so that we are also involved in what's going on? Because this really is a big opportunity that the country must not miss.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure you've heard the expression that if there are two things that you don't want to know how they're made, it's laws and sausages. And I think, I mean, there's something to that. I think a lot of the time we're not communicating, and we probably should be better at communicating with people like yourself.
Thank you.
But there's a lot of times when we're not communicating because, quite honestly, the technical detail in some of these areas is not the most exciting thing. I mean, I sit through meetings where people are having hour-long discussions about the details of customs procedures, and even as somebody who is very, very interested in this, I don't necessarily follow it terribly well. This platform, I would imagine, will work like many of the other platforms inside the Investor Council, as in it will be a focal point for different people to have detailed discussions, and then as those discussions become public and start to become things which are discussed as potentially new laws or amendments to laws or new government policy, then that would start to be the appropriate place to have more public discussions about it. I mean, the minutes of all of the Investor Council meetings are made public, and we make ourselves available to have discussions about those in situations like this one. So, I mean, I do think moving forward, to go back to the very first point, I mean, really the two driving logics for a lot of economic growth for Georgia in the medium term is going to be the development of the Middle Corridor and the development of the relationship with the EU. And so these are sort of big picture issues that I think will be a focal point for us and for all of the Investor Council.
So what's the next step? What should we be looking for? When shall this group be mobilized? Or
right. So we've already had the first exchange with the Investor Council Secretariat. I saw you had Kvanchilashvili in one of your earlier packages.
It unanimously, and they are ready to.
Yeah, exactly. So we're in the process of discussing with them exactly how this is going to be composed. I anticipate it will be put together and start working fairly soon. There are lots of issues, and probably the first priority would be to identify exactly which issues one needs to prioritize as a starting point. Yes. And my expectation is that there'll be another Investor Council meeting in a couple of months, and probably at the next Investor Council meeting, the discussions of that working group will be made public, and we'll move forward in deciding exactly how to work on this.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for these details. We'll be following, and I hope to see you again.
Very much look forward to it.
Talking about the details. Thank you so much.
Hopefully after more great wins.
Thank you.
June's going to be very exciting. Thank you.
Which are, by the way, connected with Europe and
indeed, absolutely. If we can do that well in this European competition, I'm sure we can do well in all of the European competitions.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
The Checkpoints is presented by pharmaceutical company GM Pharma.